How long can you tolerate disrespect in your own home? Sometimes the cup of patience overflows and words spoken in the heat of the moment change everything forever. This is a story about the moment when staying silent becomes impossible. Happy listening. Kesha was arranging the last of the avocado and sun-dried tomato appetizers on a massive oak platter that looked like a Viking shield. Feeling a dull, nagging ache in her lower back. Her legs were throbbing as if she hadn't just been prepping for a housewarming party, but had run a marathon. Since dawn, she had been functioning like a well-oiled machine, calibrated for a single purpose, the perfect celebration. Running around the condo with a vacuum cleaner that felt like an extension of her arm. Fighting with a stepladder near the ceiling to hang those specific warm light string lights she had bought 3 months ago. Patiently waiting for this moment. The heavy-set man with a face red from pleasure, and likely a few drinks already taken on board. Well, Loretta, congratulations. You guys really went big. Now you can sell your 2-bedroom in Indianapolis. Why would you need to drive back and forth? He boomed through the entire hallway. Kesha froze, her fingers gripping the cold edge of the platter. Her ears, trained to catch bugs in code, caught every word, every nuance. The mother-in-law's answer sounded even louder, soaked in such self-satisfaction that you could spread it on toast instead of butter. Yeah, right, she scoffed. We're going to rent it out. An extra $2,000 a month doesn't grow on trees, and we'll live here for now. We are practically the owners anyway. Marcus is my only son, my only heir. It all goes to him eventually. The world around Kesha narrowed to the size of a keyhole. The noise of voices in the living room turned into the roar of the surf, distant and unintelligible. An avocado appetizer tilted and almost slid off the platter. She managed to balance it back purely on reflex. Leaning her shoulder against the cool doorframe of the kitchen, she exhaled slowly, very slowly. It felt like broken glass was scattering in her lungs. So that was it. That was the simple scheme. The entire structure of their shared dream crumbled into atoms in 10 seconds. In her head, like on a computer screen, all stages of the deal flashed by. Here they are sitting in the developer's office. Here, Kesha is signing the contract where 70% of the condo's cost is her down payment saved over 5 years of hellish labor. Here, the realtor explains that the remaining amount can be covered by a mortgage over 7 years, if they sell their other real estate. Their joint decision. Kesha, baby, will sell mom's place in Indy, put every penny in, and then the mortgage payment will be tiny. We won't even notice it, Marcus had said, looking into her eyes with his honest sky-blue gaze. That was the condition of her consent to this move, to this joint mortgage, to having Loretta live with them, not just a request but the foundation of the entire enterprise. And they decided to simply cheat. Not to sell, but just to move their things in and live in her apartment on her territory, using her resources while turning their own property into a cash cow, renting it out and pocketing the money. $2,000 a month. Not a bad bonus to the modest salary of a sporting goods sales manager that Marcus earned. Partners, her closest people. Her heart, which a minute ago was fluttering with joy, began to beat heavily and hollowly like a church bell, not from delight, but from icy, all-consuming rage. They didn't just deceive her. They took her for an idiot, a compliant, convenient fool who would work 3 jobs to pay for the shared nest while they clipped coupons and lived for their own pleasure. Kesha took a deep, jagged breath. Her hand stopped shaking, her face turned to stone, transforming into a dispassionate mask. Slowly, almost solemnly, as if going to an execution, she walked into the living room. The noise and laughter crashed down on her, but she didn't hear them anymore. She moved in a cocoon of ringing silence. She placed the platter in the very center of the table, next to the vase that Loretta had managed to hoist back into the correct place. She scanned the gathering. There were Loretta's friends from church, evaluating her curtains. There were Marcus' second cousins, discussing how expensive all this must have been. There were her few friends, 2 developers and 1 fellow tester, huddled near the window, looking a bit like aliens at this celebration of life. She took an untouched glass from the table meant for some late guest, and poured herself some ice-cold Prosecco. The bubbles hissed furiously, rising from the bottom. Marcus noticed her and immediately drifted over, wrapping his arm around her waist. "So, my hostess, are you tired?" he whispered in her ear. And for a second, the smell of his cologne mixed with champagne made her nauseous. He didn't notice her face. Didn't notice anything at all. See how everyone loves our nest? I told you it would be the bomb. He winked at her, beaming with pride and self-admiration. Kesha forced herself to squeeze out something resembling a smile, a crooked, tight grimace. Yeah, she said quietly. The bomb. He took it as a compliment, pecked her on the cheek, and fluttered back to his friends to continue accepting congratulations. And she began to observe, not just look but truly observe, like an entomologist studying insects swarming in a jar. There was Loretta, having gathered a retinue of 3 of her friends, leading them on a tour, not to the living room or kitchen, but to the bedroom, to Kesha's bedroom, the Holy of Holies. Kesha moved slowly behind them, stopping in the doorway. Her mother-in-law, with the air of a realtor showing a luxury property, threw open the doors of Kesha's new custom closet. Look how spacious it is, she broadcasted. I'm going to move all my winter coats in here, and there will still be room left. Kesha did a good job listening to me and ordering it floor to ceiling. Although I would have chosen different handles. These antique-style ones are so yesterday. One of the friends, a woman in a purple dress, unceremoniously ran her hand along Kesha's dresses hanging on the rack. Pure synthetic, she delivered the verdict with the air of an expert. Kesha stood leaning against the doorframe, feeling a tight, cold knot twisting inside her. She stayed silent. She simply absorbed it, memorizing every word, every gesture, every disrespectful touch to her things in her house. Then the procession moved to the living room. Loretta stopped in front of a floor lamp, stylish on a thin curved leg that Kesha had snagged at a designer furniture sale. And this misunderstanding, the mother-in-law declared loudly so everyone could hear, poking a finger at it, we'll have to take to the lake house. There's no light or sense from it here. We'll put a normal lamp here, classic with a lampshade, and it will be cozier. Several people nodded in agreement. Uncle Clyde, already heavily loaded, grunted approvingly. Right, Loretta, you have to live here. You create the coziness. Kesha shifted her gaze to her husband, Marcus. Maybe at least he would stop this parade of absurdity. But Marcus was busy. He stood in the center of a circle of his buddies, gesturing animatedly. Kesha walked closer to hear. And right here on this wall, I'm going to hang an 85 in plasma, he was saying with delight. And the console goes right here under it. Just pre-ordered the new PlayStation yesterday. We're going to game hard on the weekends. One of his friends, Paul, clapped him on the shoulder. My man's settling in, but won't your car mind a gaming zone in the main room? Marcus waved his hand with such dismissal, as if shooing away an annoying fly. Oh come on, Kesha. She's gold. She understands that a man needs a place to relax. We'll work it out. He was so sure, so boundlessly, childishly sure of her compliance, of her infinite patience, that she would endure everything, swallow everything, and smile silently, just so her beloved boy would be happy. This confidence of his was more insulting than all his mother's words put together. The tension inside Kesha stopped being just a knot. It crystallized. It turned into a steel cable stretched to the limit. She felt it physically in her clenched jaw, in her tense shoulders, in her icy palms gripping the glass. She continued to circulate through the room, pouring wine for guests, smiling, nodding. But it wasn't her anymore. It was a shell, an android executing the program. Perfect hostess. The real Kesha sat somewhere deep inside behind armored glass, and with the cold, detached gaze of a surgeon. She was dissecting the situation. She saw everything. How Marcus's second cousin, Alathea, tried to discreetly slip a silver spoon from the new set into her purse. How Uncle Clyde spilled red wine on her new beige sofa and hastily covered the stain with a throw pillow. How Loretta scolded Kesha's friend, the tester Maya, for laughing too loudly. They behaved here not as guests. They behaved like invaders, like colonizers arriving on native land who didn't need to be taken into account. And at the head of this army stood the 2 people closest to her, her husband and mother-in-law. She felt like the heroine of a horror movie who was the only one in the room seeing ghosts, while the rest carelessly laugh and drink champagne. Every chuckle, every self-satisfied glance, every word about our house hit her like a slap. She thought about her mortgage, the payments, 7 years. She had already calculated in her mind how she would save, what she would give up, vacation, probably not for the next couple of years. A new car to replace her old sedan. Forget it. She was ready for this because she believed they were a team. that they were building a future together. And now it turned out she was just a draft horse hitched to a beautiful carriage. And they didn't even intend to feed her. Time dragged like melted cheese. An hour and a half. The appetizers were eaten. The hot food was almost cold. The guests relaxed. Conversations became louder, more intimate. Kesha mechanically cleared dirty plates, carried empty bottles to the kitchen. The kitchen became her sanctuary. There, standing with her back to the door, she could drop the mask for a few seconds and just stand looking into the dark window which reflected her own alien pale face. The rage, initially burning like boiling water, was replaced by a cold, ringing emptiness. And in this emptiness a decision grew, simple, clear, and terrifying in its inevitability. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she knew this evening would not end the way they all planned. The final chord, the last drop that overflowed the cup of her frozen patience, was the moment when Loretta, obviously deciding that her triumph should be documented and voiced officially, picked up a fork and dinged it distinctly several times against her glass. The noise in the living room gradually subsided. All eyes turned to her. She stood at the head of the huge table, which Kesha had bought specifically for such large gatherings, straight as a guardsman on parade, and swept everyone with a victorious look. Marcus looked at his mother with adoration and pride. He knew an ode in his honor was about to sound. "Dear guests," Loretta began pompously, as if speaking not to relatives in a living room, but at a party convention. "Today we have a big, simply huge celebration. Our family, our dynasty has found its nest." She made a dramatic pause, looking around at everyone. Kesha stood by the kitchen doorway, leaning against the wall, watching her without blinking. Her mother-in-law caught her gaze, but apparently interpreted it in her own way as a look full of admiration and gratitude from the daughter-in-law. This gave her even more confidence. "I want to say a huge thank you," she continued, raising her glass. "Thank you to my son, my Marcus. He always knew that the main thing in life is family lineage. He walked so long and stubbornly toward this goal. He tried so hard so that we, our family, would have this beautiful, magnificent home. A place where we will live happily ever after. Where our grandchildren will grow up. To you, son, to our future." And at that very moment, when the guests were ready to roar hurrah and drain their glasses, when Marcus broke into the happiest of his smiles, Kesha realized, it is now, not tomorrow, not in a week now. The point of no return had been passed. The spring that had been compressing inside her all evening reached its limit. Next came only the explosion. Kesha froze in the kitchen doorway, and for a few infinite seconds the world turned into a silent movie. There was Loretta, straight and triumphant, glass in hand, ready to deliver the throne speech. There was Marcus, her son, her husband, looking at his mother with such adoration as if she were Joan of Arc leading troops to take Orleans. And there were the guests, a mildly chewing, laughing crowd of extras, ready to explode in applause. At the first signal, the spring inside Kesha, compressing all evening, stretched to a ring, ready to snap and blow everything around to smithereens. But the explosion did not follow. Instead of a fiery flash of rage, she was flooded with Arctic cold. The very cold that comes at peak stress when the brain shuts off emotions and switches to emergency survival mode. The mode that so often saved her at work during critical system failures right before a product release. Calmness, analysis, logging. The mother-in-law's speech flowed like thick, sticky syrup. "To our new home," she proclaimed, and her voice seemed to fill the entire space, displacing the air. "To our family finally finding its fortress. May laughter always sound within these walls. May the table groan with treats, and may we all be healthy and happy." The guests shouted in unison, "Hurrah!" raising their glasses. Someone yelled, "Loretta! Marcus! Well done!" Marcus, shining like a polished penny, swept everyone with a victorious look and drank his glass to the bottom. Kesha, standing aside, also slowly raised hers. She met the gaze of Maya, her friend. In Maya's eyes splashed sympathy and anxiety. She was the only one who saw the frozen mask on Kesha's face, not the smile of a happy hostess. Kesha gave a barely perceptible shake of her head, letting her know, "It's okay. Not now." She took a small, almost symbolic sip of the icy Prosecco and placed the glass on the nearest surface. The perfect hostess program resumed operation. The salad plates needed to be cleared. She returned to the kitchen, stacking dishes in the sink. The noise from the living room came muffled as if from underwater. She heard bursts of laughter, snippets of phrases, music. But that was all somewhere else in another reality. Her reality right now was here in this kitchen that smelled of garlic, dill, and her collapsed illusions. She turned on the tap and cold water hit the plates with a noise. She put her hands under the stream, feeling the icy needles digging into her skin. It was sobering. Think, Kesha. Think. Do not panic. Panic is the enemy of the tester. She closed her eyes. Figures raced before her inner gaze. Condo cost $850,000. Her down payment $500,000. Savings from 6 years. Sold grandmother's one-bedroom in Oak Park. Giving up everything: vacations, nice clothes, restaurants, life in total economy mode for this goal. And their contribution, the promised contribution from the sale of the 2-bedroom apartment in Indianapolis that was supposed to be about $200,000. This money was meant to go toward a partial early repayment of the mortgage to lower the monthly payment from an intimidating $3,500 down to something manageable. It wasn't just participation. It was the cornerstone of the entire financial model. And they decided otherwise. Marcus, with his salary of $4,000, half of which went to his manly joys, gadgets, clothes, and hangouts with friends, obviously had no burning desire to tighten his belt, and Loretta neither. Why sell an asset bringing steady income if you can just sit on the neck of a golden daughter-in-law? After all, the son is the sole heir, which means everything that belongs to the daughter-in-law automatically becomes his property, too, and therefore hers, his mother's. Predator logic, simple and ruthless. Kesha turned off the water, shook her hands dry, and looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the oven. Pale face, dark circles under the eyes, tense line of the lips. She looked older than her 32 years. She looked tired. And they, seeing this fatigue, seeing how she slaved away, decided she could be loaded up even more, that she wouldn't notice or would notice but stay silent. Because she loves, because family. That word, which just this morning seemed warm and cozy to her, now echoed in her mouth with the taste of rust. She heard Loretta becoming animated in the living room again. And now, girls, whoever is interested, I'll show you our mansion, she announced loudly. Let's go, Tammy. Alethea, don't be shy. You have to appreciate the scale. Kesha walked out of the kitchen just in time to see her mother-in-law like a seasoned tour guide leading her retinue. Her friend Tammy in a loud purple dress, and the husband's cousin Oliva, a massive woman resembling a living commode deep into the apartment. Marcus just smiled approvingly after them. He was too busy opening another bottle of wine for his friends. Kesha slowly, like in a dream, moved after them, not to stop them, but to see with her own eyes, to record, to log. The first stop was the living room. Loretta stopped in front of that very floor lamp Kesha had found with such difficulty. Here, look. She pointed at it with such disgust, as if it were something indecent. An example of how one detail can kill the whole interior. Cold, lifeless light like in an operating room. No soul, no coziness. I already spotted a beautiful Italian lamp in a salon. Bronze leg, big fabric shade with fringe, crystal pendants. Now that will be class, immediate status. And this piece of iron goes to the lake house. There's no light in the shed there. It'll come in handy. Tammy in the purple dress nodded in agreement, looking around the room with an evaluating gaze. Yes, Loretta. Honey, you have taste. It's immediately obvious. Young people these days just have IKEA in their heads. Everything identical, like in an incubator. Kesha stood a few steps behind by the wall. She looked at her floor lamp, for which she had paid almost $1,000 at a sale. It seemed to her the embodiment of style and lightness, the curved line, matte black metal, warm light pouring from a simple white shade. It was part of her dream of a light, uncluttered space, and now it was sentenced to exile in a shed. And in its place they predicted a bronze monster with crystals. Kesha mentally made a note in her internal report. Item 1. Living room planned replacement of lighting fixtures in accordance with user LS taste. Status critical bug. The procession moved on to the bedroom, to her bedroom. Loretta threw the door open without knocking, with the gesture of a person entering their own pantry. And this is our main sanctuary, she announced. The bed is temporary though. I like mattresses firmer, orthopedic. I have back problems. We'll need to order a proper German one. For now we'll tolerate this. She walked up to the bed made with an impeccably white coverlet and pressed on the mattress with her hand, a bit soft. Marcus might be fine, but not for me. Kesha felt a chill run down her spine. No longer just criticism, but a direct declaration of intent. Not suitable for me. We will order another. She felt not like the owner, but a temporary tenant whose things are tolerated until the real owner's things arrive. But the climax was the closet, that huge floor-to-ceiling one that ate up a good chunk of the furnishing budget. Loretta threw open the sliding doors with a triumphant look. "And here is my main pride," she said. "I insisted we get it custom-made. Look at the volume. All my fur coats will fit here. All my dresses, and there will still be room." Tammy immediately stuck her nose inside. She unceremoniously ran her hand along a row of Kesha's hanging dresses. "Oh, Kesha, honey, why is everything so plain?" she drawled with fake sympathy. "The fabrics aren't noble. You need to wear something more substantial. You are now the wife of a serious man, the mistress of such an apartment." Loretta pursed her lips. "I told her, Tammy. I told her she needs to invest in her wardrobe, but she doesn't listen to me. All in her work, in her computers, but it's okay. We'll fix that. I'll take her shopping, show her what real women's clothing is." Altha, who had been silent until then, emitted an approving hum, and for some reason touched the sleeve of Kesha's cashmere coat. "Thin for our winter," she delivered the verdict. Kesha watched as strangers' hands touched her things, as strangers' mouths discussed her taste, her choices, her life. They stood in her bedroom by her closet and divided space in it for their fur coats, planning how they would re-educate her. This was no longer an invasion. It was an occupation. The internal protocol was updated with a new entry. Item 2, bedroom. Planned replacement of the mattress, complete audit and partial replacement of user KV's wardrobe contents, under the guidance of user LS status blocking defect. They left the bedroom and Loretta pointed to the door opposite. "And this is our room with perspective." She smiled mysteriously. "Empty for now, just Kesha's boxes, but we already know what will be here." She threw the door open. The room was indeed almost empty. By the window stood a desk and chair that Kesha had brought from her rental. Along the walls were piled boxes of books and professional literature. This was supposed to be her office, her personal space, a place where she could quietly work from home, prepare for certifications, read. "This will be the nursery," Loretta announced solemnly, sweeping her hand around the room. "We'll put the crib right against this wall. No window, no draft. A changing table here and a dresser for baby things here. Plenty of room, just right for a grandson or granddaughter. It's high time. 32 years old, not 16. The clock is ticking." She looked at Kesha with the expression one uses to look at a broodmare expected to produce offspring. Tammy and Oliva nodded in agreement. "Right, Loretta? A woman's main purpose is motherhood. God willing. God willing." In that moment, Kesha realized they had planned not only her apartment. They had planned her entire life, her body, her time, her future. She was supposed to not only pay for their comfort, but also fulfill the demographic plan. Give birth to an heir. The very one to whom everything would go anyway. The icy rage was replaced by something else. Strange detached curiosity of a researcher stumbling upon a completely new unknown species of predator. Brazen, unprincipled and absolutely convinced of their right to devour someone else's life. Item 3, office repurposing of the room into a nursery. Timeline immediate status fatal system error. While this theater of the absurd unfolded in one half of the apartment, its own play was running in the other. Marcus, surrounded by friends, was on a roll. Kesha, returning to the living room, found him in a triumphant pose. He stood by the wall opposite the sofa, arms spread wide as if hugging an invisible object. "And right here, boys, my dream will hang," he broadcasted. "OLED panel 85 inches. I already picked the model. Dolby Atmos sound, soundbar, subwoofer, total immersion." Paul, his best friend, whistled. "Serious claim. And where does the console go?" "Right here." Marcus pointed to the spot under the imaginary TV. "We'll make a shelf. The new PlayStation is already on its way. Got it at launch. And I'll buy myself a beanbag chair. Imagine weekends. Me a huge chair and the new God of War on a giant screen. It's going to be cosmic." Paul clapped him on the shoulder. "Living the life, brother. But how did your Kesha feel about this?" Not every woman approves of turning the living room into a man cave. Marcus let out a condescending chuckle. He waved his hand as if the question wasn't worth attention. Oh, give me a break, Kesha. She's gold, not just a wife. She knows how hard I work to provide for the family. She understands a man needs personal space, a place to relax. We always reach an agreement. She'll criticize for show and then she'll bring me chips herself. She's a smart woman. He said it so lightly, so casually that for a moment Kesha's breath caught. He wasn't just lying to his friends. He believed it himself. In his world, he was the provider, the head of the family who has the right to rest and entertainment. And she was the service staff, the smart woman who must understand and accept his right. Only the provider in this scheme was her. It was she who worked herself to the bone, closing releases at night. It was her salary that covered 70% of their current standard of living. And he sold treadmills and got a commission. Her golden understanding Kesha would bring him chips. She felt a bitter caustic nausea rising to her throat. She silently turned around and walked to the balcony. She needed air urgently. The balcony was the only place Loretta's tentacles hadn't reached yet. Kesha firmly closed the glass door behind her, cutting herself off from the party noise. The freezing February air hit her face, burned her lungs. Below, far, far away, Chicago glowed with lights. Car lights on the drive merged into two endless glowing rivers, red and white. Beautiful. She had dreamed of this view. Dreamed of sitting here in a chair, wrapped in a blanket with a cup of cocoa, looking at the night city, at her city in her apartment. She leaned on the cold railing. The dream crumbled. Her apartment was turning into a battlefield where she was outnumbered, 2 against 1, and these 2 were sure she was their trophy. The door opened quietly. Maya, her friend and colleague, stepped out onto the balcony. She walked up and stood next to her, also looking at the city. For a while they were silent. You look like you just found a bug in the code that's going to crash the whole system in an hour, Maya said quietly at last. What's happening, Kay? Kesha smirked crookedly. Worse, I realized the entire architecture of the project was flawed from the start. She didn't go into details. Not now. But Maya understood without words. Your mother-in-law is some kind of Terminator in a skirt. She sighed. She was just explaining to Tammy that this building was built incorrectly, and that she would have chosen a different developer for the housewarming in the apartment you bought. That's a new level of audacity. It's not audacity, Maya. It's a strategy, Kesha answered dully. And I was a tactical miscalculation. Maya put a hand on her shoulder. If you need help, any help, even moving stuff out, just say the word. Kesha nodded gratefully. Thanks. I can handle it. They returned to the apartment. The party was winding down. Some guests were already saying goodbye. Uncle Clyde had fallen asleep in the armchair. His head dropped on his chest. His wife was trying to shake him awake. Alpha, saying goodbye, kissed Loretta 3 times and whispered something in her ear that made her beam. Passing the serving table, the aunt, with the masterful honed movement of a magician, swept 2 silver forks and a spoon from the new set into her immense bag. Kesha saw it. She just stood and watched. Another stroke to the portrait. Not just invaders but looters too. The last of the outsiders to leave were the mother-in-law's friends. Loretta walked them to the door like a queen dismissing ladies in waiting. Come again, girls. Now that we're close, we'll see each other more often, she chirped. Next Saturday, let's gather. I'll bake a cabbage pie just how you like it. The kitchen here is big. Convenient. Kesha, standing nearby, heard it. I will bake. Kitchen is convenient. Not Kesha and I, not in Kesha's kitchen. Everything had already been appropriated mentally, and no doubts remained. Soon this appropriation would move from mental to physical. When the door closed behind the last guests, the apartment became unusually quiet. Only the 3 of them remained, and a mountain of dirty dishes. Marcus stretched blissfully. Phew, what an evening. Everything went perfectly, right? Everyone is thrilled. He walked up to Kesha, hugged her and tried to kiss her. She gently pulled away. I'm tired. Of course, kitten. You did so much today. He wasn't offended in the slightest. Mom, how are you? I'm wonderful, Loretta responded cheerfully. She critically surveyed the table piled with food scraps. Okay, let's clean up tomorrow. I'll handle it in the morning. Now sleep. I already have everything planned. Tomorrow we go to Home Depot. We need to buy hooks for the bathroom and a new rug for the hallway. This one. She kicked the modest rug at the entrance with contempt. Is good for nothing. They went to their rooms. Kesha walked into the living room to collect the empty glasses, and then her gaze fell on the sofa. On her new light, almost white sofa. On one of the cushions, an ugly dark red stain was spreading. Wine, the very same that Uncle Clyde had spilled. And the cushion wasn't in its place. It had been moved to cover the stain. Kesha slowly walked over and moved the cushion. The stain was large. It had already soaked into the expensive upholstery. A symbol, a seal, their stamp on her world, a mark they left. We were here and we don't give a damn. She stood and looked at that stain, and in her head there was no anger or resentment, only a cold, clear thought, sharp as a command line string. Marcus walked into the living room, changed into sweatpants. He saw where she was looking. Oh, did Uncle Clyde mess that up, old stump? He chuckled. Don't sweat it, honey. We'll call the cleaners or just order a new cover. No big deal. It's just a thing. He walked up and pecked her on the top of her head. Didn't notice how she tensed. Didn't feel the cold emanating from her. To him it was just a stain, just a thing. He yawned and went toward the bedroom. Kesha stayed. Dawn crept into the living room as a gray, joyless scout, snatching the consequences of yesterday's carnage from the twilight. The mountain of dirty dishes on the table looked like the ruins of an ancient city. Lonely crumpled napkins, half-empty bottles frozen in awkward poses. And amidst all this, the sofa, her new, her precious, her light beige sofa bought with the bonus from a project that nearly cost her health. And on it, like an ugly scar on a beauty's face, the dark red, already soaked in darkened wine stain. Uncle Clyde had done his best, and someone, possibly Uncle Clyde himself, or maybe his caring spouse, had shamefully covered this act of vandalism with a couch pillow. Out of sight, out of mind. Kesha stood barefoot on the cool parquet and looked at that stain. It mesmerized her. It wasn't just ruined textile. It was a flag planted on conquered territory. A mark, a seal, a symbol of their attitude toward her home, toward her labor. It's just a thing. Marcus' carefree voice from yesterday sounded in her head. Just a thing, like this entire apartment apparently was for them, just a collection of things they could use, spoil, and remodel at their discretion. She didn't feel anger. The anger had burned out yesterday, leaving behind only the cold, hard ash of resolve. She felt like a surgeon looking at advanced gangrene. You don't treat this with pusses. You cut. Marcus was sleeping in their bedroom. No, in her bedroom, the sleep of the righteous. He wasn't even snoring but blissfully snuffling, arms thrown out and smiling in his sleep, probably dreaming of his friends' enthusiastic faces and the huge plasma on the wall. Loretta was also resting in the former guest room, which she had already mentally renamed hers. Kesha was alone in the apartment in complete, deafening silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. She didn't start cleaning, didn't touch a single plate. Instead, she walked into her under cabinet where boxes of books still stood, sat at her old but faithful desk, and opened her laptop. She didn't check work email or social media. She created a new file, an Excel spreadsheet. She named it Project Nest Risk Analysis. It was habitual. It was what she did best. Breaking chaos down into components, systematizing and finding critical vulnerabilities. Column A, incident, threat. Column B, initiator. Column C, severity, low, medium, critical, blocker. Column D, comments. The first line appeared by itself. A 1, public announcement of intent to rent out the Indianapolis apartment, bypassing initial agreements. B1, Loretta S. C1, blocker. D1, undermining financial basis of joint project, breach of key deal condition. She typed fast, dryly, without emotion. Fingers flew over the keyboard, as if she were compiling a report on another crash on the test server. A 2, plans to remodel living room, replacing floor lamp with status lamp with fringe. B2. Loretta SC2. Critical. D2. Attempt to change design object without owner approval. Imposition of alien aesthetic preferences. A 3. Plans for audit and replacement of owner's wardrobe. Re-education. B3. Loretta S. Tammy, accomplice. C3. Critical. D3. Invasion of personal space. Devaluation of owner's choice. Passive aggression. A 4. repurposing office into nursery without agreement. B4. Loretta, C4. Blocker. D4. Depriving owner of workspace. Planning owner's life without participation. Reproductive pressure. A5. Plans to turn living room into gaming zone. B5. Marcus. C5 critical. D5 ignoring interests of second user of space. Prioritization of personal entertainment over general comfort. A6 public lowering of owner status. Kesha is gold. She'll bring chips herself. B6. Marcus. C6. Critical. D6. Formation of service staff image in eyes of third parties. Gaslighting. She stopped and reread the list. It looked like a disaster report. Any of the points marked blocker would be enough to send a project for full rework. And she already had two. And this was just in one evening. She saved the file and closed the laptop. Structured chaos ceased to be just chaos. It became a plan of action. Around 8 a.m., movement began in the apartment. The first to wake up, of course, was Loretta. She came out to the kitchen in a new silk robe with dragons that Kesha had never seen before, cheerful and full of energy, as if she hadn't been drinking wine until midnight yesterday, but doing yoga at dawn. "Good morning," she announced loudly, scanning the mess in the living room. "Oh, we really made a scene." "Nothing. I'll quickly tidy up here." "Kesha, baby, did you make coffee?" Kesha, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of water, silently nodded at the French press. She had specifically made the coffee stronger, as she liked it herself, knowing her mother-in-law preferred it weaker. Petty, childish revenge, but it gave her a sliver of grim satisfaction. Loretta took a sip from a cup she poured herself without asking, and grimaced. "Bitter like tar. Did you start skimping on water?" "All right, I'll dilute it with boiling water." She clicked the kettle on and began to command. "Okay, Marcus is still sleeping and rightly so. Let him rest. Yesterday was his triumph. You and I, Kesha, will quickly clean up here. You load the dishes in the machine and I'll wipe everything off the table. Quickly. We have big plans today. Remember Home Depot? We need a new rug in the hallway and hooks for the bathroom." Kesha obeyed silently without a single word of objection. She became the perfect executive. Her movements were precise and mechanical. Plate after plate went into the dishwasher, glass after glass. She acted like a robot, like that very android she felt like yesterday. And this calmness, this submissiveness seemed to completely suit her mother-in-law. Loretta interpreted it as due as recognition of her authority. She didn't even notice the lack of a smile on her daughter-in-law's face. Didn't see the cold in her eyes. She saw only obedience. By the time Marcus woke up, the living room was shining clean. The stain on the sofa lonely reminded of yesterday. But otherwise order reigned. "Wow, my girls worker bees," he admired, kissing sleepy Kesha on the cheek and his mother on the head. "Cleaned everything already. That's what real homemakers mean." Kesha felt something tighten inside. My girls. He lumped them into one category. She, who invested $500,000 in her future into this apartment, and his mother, who arrived to everything ready-made, were just girls to him who cleaned up his trash. "Get ready, sleepyheads," commanded Loretta. "Great deeds await us." "Kesha, you're driving." The trip to Home Depot turned into the apotheosis of Loretta's self-satisfaction. The huge hardware store on a Saturday hummed like a disturbed beehive. Thousands of people with carts stuffed with dreams of renovation wandered between endless aisles. Loretta felt like a fish in water here. She led them confidently like Moses through the desert. "So the rug and hooks, that's for show," she whispered conspirator ally as they entered. "We need to solve global issues. Let's start with wallpaper." She dragged them to the wallpaper department. Kesha silently pushed the empty cart behind them. Marcus walked alongside, hands lazily stuffed in pockets. "Here, look." Loretta stopped by a stand with heavy vinyl wallpaper. She picked up one of the rolls, beige, with pretentious gold embossing in the form of some filigree. "Now this is status. This is wealth, not your white walls like in a hospital. We'll repaper the hallway immediately. It will look like a palace." "Mom, why do we need a palace?" Marcus objected weakly. "More for form. We have Scandinavian style." "Sort of. What's Scandinavian?" Loretta scoffed. "Poverty is a style, not Scandinavian. No money. Paint walls white. But when there is money, you need to show there is." Right, Kesha? She looked at Kesha expecting support. Kesha looked at the ugly roll in her hands. It cost $50 a roll for their hallway. They needed at least 10 rolls. $500 plus materials to turn her stylish minimalist hall into a semblance of an entryway in a gypsy baron's house. Very expressive, Kesha said in a level voice. Loretta took it as a compliment. See, even Kesha understands means we're taking it. Marcus put 10 rolls in the cart. Marcus looked at Kesha with doubt. She gave a barely perceptible nod. This was part of the game. Allow them to go as far as possible. Allow them to believe they won. Marcus shrugged and with effort threw the heavy rolls into the cart. Further, more in the tile department, Loretta chose a backsplash for the kitchen. Bright orange tile with images of sunflowers. Let's liven up your gray kitchen, she declared. It will be sunny summery. In the plumbing department, she eyed a new shower head. Huge as a plate with a tropical rain function. Because what you have hanging there is some kind of pipette, she commented. No pleasure whatsoever. Marcus, initially resisting, gradually got a taste for it. Oh Mom, let's also look at lights for my gaming zone. I need directional light. They were already discussing together like two accomplices which spots would fit their concept better. Completely ignoring Kesha, who stood next to a cart already half full of things she hated. She felt like a ghost, invisible, non-existent. Her opinion wasn't just unasked. It was as if it didn't exist in nature. They were furnishing her apartment as if she herself wasn't there. At the checkout, the total exceeded $1,500. Loretta looked at Kesha with a victorious look. Well, take out the card, hostess. Investing in coziness. Marcus coughed embarrassedly. Mom, maybe not everything at once. We have the mortgage. 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 You want to live in beauty now? Loretta cut off. Kesha earns well. She can afford it. It's for our shared joy. Kesha silently took out her card and tapped it on the terminal. The beep of the machine sounded like the click of a shutter. She paid. Paid for wallpaper with filigree, tile with sunflowers, and other tastelessness they chose. Marcus looked at her with gratitude. Thanks, kitten. I'll make it up to you somehow. Definitely, Kesha thought. The week stretched like rubber. Loretta completely settled into the role of mistress. She started cooking but did it so everyone saw what a feat it was. She cooked heavy stews that Kesha didn't like and fried cutlets whose smell soaked into the new furniture. She rearranged flowers. She threw out 2 of Kesha's favorite posters because they collected dust. Every day she committed a small expansion, conquering new territories. Marcus either didn't notice this or pretended not to. It was convenient for him. He was fed. His laundry was done and Golden Kesha paid for everything and stayed silent. Kesha's silence became increasingly ominous. She turned into a shadow, left for work early, returned late, ate dinner almost without participating in conversations, and retreated to her office, the only place Loretta didn't dare invade with rearrangements yet, and sat there until deep into the night. Marcus thought she was working. He even bragged to his mother. Look what a hard worker my Kesha is. Everything for the family. He didn't know Kesha wasn't working. She was preparing for war. She read legal forms. She studied property laws. And she was preparing her main move. The fatal error, as befits a good drama, happened at the most unexpected moment. On Wednesday evening, without warning, Mr. Harrison, Kesha's boss, stopped by. A solid fit man of 50, the head of their entire testing department. He hadn't been at the housewarming as he was on a business trip, and decided to drop off a gift, an expensive espresso machine. Here, Kesha, he said, handing her the heavy box. So, work is even more productive. Saw your latest reports. Brilliant. Kesha was embarrassed and grateful. She invited him for tea. Loretta and Marcus, catching the daughter-in-law's boss, immediately materialized in the living room, exuding cordiality. Loretta instantly dragged out a cake. Marcus poured tea. They wanted to make an impression. Mr. Harrison was a man of the old school, direct, businesslike, and valuing solidity in everything. He looked around the spacious living room approvingly. A mansion, Kesha. Congratulations. A wise investment. Real estate is the only reliable asset right now. We tried. Marcus immediately chimed in, breaking into a smile. It was our joint decision. That's right, nodded Mr. Harrison. He took a sip of tea and looked at Marcus with his piercing gaze with which he usually revealed weak spots in subordinates' logic. Right now, the smartest thing is to consolidate assets. I understand, sold your property to invest the maximum in the down payment and minimize the servitude to the bank. That is the only correct strategy if you don't want to work for interest the rest of your life. The question was asked point blank. Silence hung in the room for a second. Kesha felt Loretta tense up. She saw panic flash in Marcus's eyes for a split second. This was his moment of truth. He could tell the truth, could dodge the answer. But before him sat his wife's boss, a big important man, and Marcus desperately wanted to look solid, successful, equal in status in his eyes. He straightened his back. He looked at Mr. Harrison with the confident smile of a successful man. Of course, Mr. Harrison. How else? He uttered smoothly and convincingly, as if he had rehearsed this speech all his life. We are a team of family. We sold my mother's condo in Indianapolis. Put every penny in here into our family nest. Went all in, so to speak. We believe half measures are for the weak. Loretta, hearing this, beamed. What a son, an eagle. How beautifully said. She looked at him with undisguised pride. Mr. Harrison shifted his gaze to Kesha, a questioning, checking gaze. And you, Kesha, agreed to such a risk. And here Kesha made her move. She didn't stay silent. She didn't expose them. She did something worse. She supported them. She smiled softly, put her hand over Marcus's hand, resting on the table, and squeezed it. Yes, she said in a quiet but firm voice. It was a very serious and difficult decision, especially for Loretta. After all, that is her home. But we made it together. For the sake of our common future. At that moment the trap snapped shut. She saw Marcus' shoulders relax. He won. He lied and she covered for him. Means she's in the game. Means she accepted everything. He looked at her with gratitude and love. Loretta looked at her with approval. Finally, the stubborn one understood what family is. They both didn't see the steel glint in the depths of her eyes. They saw only what they wanted to see. Submission. Well, commendable, concluded Mr. Harrison, finishing his tea. Serious approach. Well done. All right. Won't disturb you. I have to go. He left, leaving behind the smell of expensive cologne, and a sense of total unconditional victory for Marcus and his mother. They were in seventh heaven. Their lie was cemented, and it was cemented by Kesha herself. As soon as the door closed behind the boss, Loretta burst. Euphoria from the successful deception gave her boldness Kesha hadn't even suspected. Well, son, you are something. How you handled him, half measures are for the weak, just like a minister or something. She looked at Marcus with adoration. Then she turned to Kesha. And you did good. Said everything right. Family is the main thing. She was so excited, so sure of her impunity that she decided it was time to move to the main thing. Marcus, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a contractor, she began, conspirator ally. Remember I told you about the wall between the kitchen and living room? Well, he confirmed. It's non-load bearing. Imagine the possibilities. We tear it down to hell and we get a huge kitchen dining room 40 foot like in American movies. We'll put a big island in the center, a bar counter. Now that will be life. We can host 30 people. She waved her hands, drawing castles in the air. She already saw this new design. She was already hosting guests in it. Marcus, still under the impression of his success, lit up. Whoa, Mom, that's an idea. Is it expensive? Nonsense. Loretta waved her hand. The main thing is to get the permit for remodeling, but breaking is fast. My friend has a crew. They'll do everything cheaply and with quality. We start next week. They stood in the middle of her living room, Kesha's living room, and enthusiastically discussed how they would tear down walls in it. Not let's discuss with Kesha. Not how do you like the idea. We tear down and start next week. Kesha stood and looked at them. Inside her was absolute ringing silence. No shock, no rage, only cold, crystal clear realization. This is the end. The final point. They intended not just to live at her expense. They intended to physically destroy what she created, dismantle her dream brick by brick, and build something of their own in its place, ugly and alien. That evening, she went to bed earlier than usual, citing a headache. Marcus and Loretta sat in the kitchen for a long time, rustling paper. Kesha was sure they were already drawing the remodeling plan. She lay in the dark without sleep, staring at the ceiling. The plan that had matured in her head all week finally took shape. It was risky. It was cruel. But she had no other choice. Waiting for everything to quiet down in the apartment, she got up again and went to her laptop. This time she didn't open Excel. She opened her email and contact list on her phone. She created a new email. Subject: Housewarming 2.0. Cozy evening. The text was simple and friendly. Dear friends, our last gathering was so chaotic and crowded that we didn't really get to talk. Therefore, Marcus and I decided to arrange a second, more intimate and cozy meeting, just to sit, eat well, and talk quietly. We expect you this Saturday at 7:00 p.m. We will be very glad to see you. She carefully compiled the recipient list. Uncle Clyde and his wife mandatory. A couple of Loretta's most gossipy friends, including Tammy and Purple. Marcus' closest friends, including Paul, who asked about the man cave, and of course her loyal Maya. The audience had to be mixed. There had to be witnesses from both sides, and most importantly, those who heard Loretta's speech yesterday about renting out the Indianapolis apartment. She reread it. Send. Saturday arrived inevitably like a deadline at the end of a sprint. It came not with sunbeams and birds singing, but with the same gray, dreary light that now seemed to Kesha the only possible state of this world. She woke up long before the alarm, lay in the dark, and listened. Listened to Marcus blissfully snuffling nearby, rolled onto her half of the bed and hugging her pillow. Listened to something creak behind the wall in the room, whom Loretta already called nothing but my bedroom. Probably the mother-in-law turned in her sleep, dreaming of demolished walls and gold filigree. In this apartment, bought with her money paid for by her sleepless nights, she didn't even own the morning piece. She was a stranger at her own celebration of life. Kesha proceeded to prepare for the second cozy evening with the cold methodicalness of a surgeon preparing an operating room. No fuss, no exhaustive fatigue like last time. Everything was calibrated to the millimeter. She didn't cook 10 types of salads and 3 hot dishes. On the table, elegant but simple snacks were to appear. Bruschettas with various toppings, a cheese plate with honey and nuts, olives, several types of expensive cold cuts. Enough to create the appearance of hospitality, but without the strain, without the desire to please anyone. This wasn't a party. It was a stage, and food was merely part of the scenery. Loretta, appearing in the kitchen around 10 o'clock, was full of enthusiasm. She had already managed to call her contractor and agree on his visit next week to assess the scope of work. She fluttered around the kitchen, looking over Kesha's shoulder. Something modest this time, Kesha baby, she remarked, evaluating the baguette being sliced. Did you at least buy a cake? Guests love sweets. We'll manage without cake, Kesha answered in a level voice, not looking up from her task. The evening will be light. Well, draw Loretta, not catching the icy notes. Mistress's whim. Although I would have baked my signature pie. Well, okay. Next time I'll at least handle the table setting since you always do everything unnaturally. She began rearranging the glasses Kesha had already set with the air of a connoisseur, moving them a centimeter to the left then a centimeter to the right, creating the illusion of activity and asserting her authority. Marcus, waking up closer to noon, was in a great mood. He hugged Kesha from behind, burying his nose in her hair. What a smart girl you are, kitten. Came up with such a cool idea to gather the closest ones since last time was kind of a circus. And today we'll sit family style calmly. I told Paul just that. Come over. Today is chill without pathos. He sincerely considered this idea her manifestation of care. His brain tuned to receiving pleasure and avoiding any difficulties. Didn't even try to analyze her sudden mood swing. He saw what he wanted to see. His golden Ka had resigned herself and started building a cozy nest again. Even her coldness he wrote off as fatigue after work. It was so convenient for him. In the corner of the hallway still stood the 5 rolls of wallpaper with gold filigree leaned against the wall. Loretta walked past them with the look a general gives captured enemy banners. Every time she saw them, Kesha felt something harden inside her, turning from ash to granite. It was a beautiful visual reminder, fuel for her cold rage. By 7 p.m. everything was ready. The apartment looked almost the same as a week ago, but the atmosphere was different. Something elusive hung in the air, some glass fragility. Marcus turned on quiet lounge music. Loretta, dressed in a new burgundy dress that emphasized her monumental figure, took the place of honor in the armchair, preparing to receive guests as the rightful mistress. Kesha, in a simple black sheath dress, moved through the apartment almost silently, lighting candles. Flames danced in her dark, dilated pupils. She looked like a priestess preparing for a mysterious ritual. First to arrive, oddly enough, was Uncle Clyde with his wife. He was sober, embarrassed, and dragged a bottle of Hennessy as an apology for last time. He looked guilty at Kesha, then at the sofa, but said nothing. Loretta immediately intercepted the initiative. "Clyde, come in. Don't be shy. Make yourselves comfortable. More relatives." Then the mother-in-law's friends trickled in. The inevitable Tammy in an even louder, this time emerald dress, and another lady Kesha saw for the first time. Behind them, Marcus's friends Paul and another guy. Last, as Kesha requested, came Maya. She entered and their eyes met. In Maya's gaze was anxiety and readiness. Kesha gave a barely perceptible nod. Everything according to plan. The evening began surprisingly calmly. The guests, obviously remembering the embarrassment of last week, behaved more restrainedly. Conversations flowed lazily like a river in a drought. Marcus tried to liven up the atmosphere, telling jokes. Loretta broadcasted about her plans for the lake house season. Kesha silently poured wine and replenished snacks. She was the perfect invisible hostess. She chose a position by the kitchen doorway from where the whole room was visible to her. She observed there was Marcus getting carried away again, pointing Paul to the wall. "And here's the plasma. Remember I said should be delivered next week. Can't wait." There was Loretta lowering her voice, confidentially informing Tammy and the wall. "Imagine we can break it down, already agreed, starting in a few days. We'll have Versailles here." She stroked the wall with her hand tenderly like a beloved pet. There was Uncle Clyde, emboldened after the second glass of cognac, loudly asking Loretta again. "So you mean you're renting out the indie place? Found tenants already?" And Loretta, absolutely sure that everyone here was family, that everyone was in the know and approved of her genius plan, answered just as loudly and smugly as last time. "Of course, the guys are moving in next week. A young couple, $2,000 easy money will go right toward the renovation." Kesha absorbed it all. Every word, every gesture, her internal error log filled with new entries. She felt the tension building. But not in her, in the guests. Marcus' friends exchanged glances. Tammy and the second friend listened to Loretta with admiration. And Maya? Mia looked at Kesha, and in her eyes read. When there was a moment, short as a flash, when Kesha almost faltered. She looked at Marcus. He was laughing, telling Paul something. And in his laughter was so much sincere, childish joy. He wasn't evil. He was just weak, infantile, spoiled by his all-forgiving mother and her Kesha's all-consuming love and patience. "Maybe don't do it. Maybe just talk one more time, the 101st time. Explain, demand." But then she shifted her gaze to Loretta. She caught her look and nodded encouragingly, as if saying, "See how good everything is, how nicely we settled in." And in that look was so much victorious contempt for her feelings, for her rights, that all doubts evaporated. A surgeon shouldn't pity a gangrenous limb. He must sever it to save the organism. Time approached 9. The evening reached its peak. Wine was drunk. Conversations became louder. And Loretta decided the moment had come. The moment to cement success, to finally assert her status. She is the queen mother, mistress of this palace, and everyone else is her grateful retinue. She picked up a fork and, just like a week ago, dinged it distinctly several times against her glass. A moment of attention. "Tension, please." Her voice sounded commanding, drowning out the hum of conversations. Everyone went quiet. Uncle Clyde froze with a glass halfway to his mouth. Paul stopped arguing with Marcus about football. All eyes turned to her. Loretta stood up, not completely, but just rose in her armchair like a monarch on a throne. She swept everyone with a victorious look. Marcus looked at his mother with a proud smile. He was waiting for the ode in his honor again. "My dears," she began pompously, dragging out words. "I am so glad we all gathered here today in such a warm, almost family atmosphere. Last week showed that our house is a hospitable house, that people are drawn here, and this is the main sign that we did everything right." She paused, letting the words sink in. I want to say once again I am infinitely proud of my son. She extended a hand toward Marcus. My Marcus always knew that the main thing is family is the native nest. He put so much strength, so much soul into ensuring that our big and friendly family would have this beautiful, magnificent home. A place of our strength, a place where here is the signal, the limit. Kesha slowly, without a single sudden movement, stood up from her place by the wall. She didn't pick up a glass. Her hands were empty. She simply stood straight and motionless. In the ensuing silence, her movement attracted everyone's attention. Guests looked at her with smiles. Everyone was sure she stood up to supplement the mother-in-law's speech to say a few grateful words to her husband and his mother. Marcus smiled encouragingly at her. Loretta momentarily interrupted her monologue, graciously allowing the daughter-in-law to insert her 2 cents, and then Kesha spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it sounded in the deafening silence like the crack of a whip. Clear, articulate, without a shadow of emotion. I paid for this table. Pause. The smiles on the guests' faces faltered and froze. Marcus stopped smiling, his face elongated. Loretta froze with her mouth slightly open. Kesha swept her gaze over the table where these people sat, eating her food, drinking her wine in her apartment. I bought this apartment. The silence became so dense it seemed touchable. A fork dropped from someone's hand, clattered against a plate with a deafening crash. Kesha shifted her empty, cold gaze first to the petrified mother-in-law, and then to the deadly pale husband. And you both get out. For a moment the world stood on pause. It seemed no one breathed. Loretta's face slowly filled with crimson color. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish thrown on shore, but couldn't make a sound. First to recover was Marcus. The instinct of self-preservation, the desire to save face, to force everyone to believe this was just a bad joke, hysteria. A woman's whim worked instantly. He jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair. "Kesha, what are you saying?" he shouted, but his voice broke, turning into a pathetic squeak. He tried to laugh to emit a nervous, artificial laugh. "Guys, don't pay attention. She's just joking, overworked, nerves. Mom and I don't have our own place. Where would we go?" He looked at the guests, at friends seeking support, begging them to believe his version. But his lie, so convincing just yesterday, now sounded pathetic and unconvincing. Kesha didn't even raise her voice. She looked straight into his eyes, and in her gaze was the cold, ruthless truth. "You do," she cut off. "A 2-bedroom condo in Indianapolis, the very one you allegedly sold to invest in our family nest, the very one you, Loretta, planned to rent out in a week for $2,000. The keys, I assume, are with you. Always carry them just in case. Well, that's wonderful. The case has arrived." She said it so calmly, so casually that the effect was scarier than any scream. All the lies, the entire scheme carefully built by them, collapsed in one instant, burying them under its debris in front of everyone, in front of Uncle Clyde, who heard this conversation, in front of Tammy, to whom Loretta bragged about her plans, in front of Paul, to whom Marcus fed lies about the team and joint contribution. All puzzle pieces fell into place. All masks were torn off. Kesha swept a look over the frozen guests. "I apologize for the ruined evening. The show is over. You have." She shifted her gaze again to mother and son. 1 hour to pack. What started next didn't look like a scandal. It looked like an emergency evacuation from the site of a technological disaster. First to recover was Uncle Clyde's wife. She grabbed her husband by the hand, muttered something like, "We have to go. Sorry, Kesha," and dragged him to the exit, not letting him finish his cognac. Tammy, the mother-in-law's friend, sat with a crimson face, looking into her plate. She obviously felt like an accomplice. Her companion, without thinking long, grabbed her purse and without saying goodbye, skewered to the door. Marcus's friends, Paul and the second guy, sat with stone faces. Paul got up, walked over to Marcus, who was still standing in the middle of the room, blinking, and quietly said, "Yeah, bro, you messed up." He put a hand on his shoulder, but it wasn't a gesture of support, but rather a gesture of farewell. Then he nodded to Kesha, and in his look was something like respect, and they left too. Within 10 minutes the apartment emptied. Only Maya remained. She walked up to Kesha, hugged her and whispered quietly, "You are a rock. I'll call you an Uber if you need to leave here for the night." Kesha shook her head. No need. This is my house. They are the ones who must leave. When Maya left, heavy, thick silence hung in the apartment. In this silence, only the three of them remained. Loretta finally found the gift of speech, but it wasn't a scream, not a curse. It was a strangled, hissing whisper. You ungrateful, she wheezed, looking at Kesha with hatred. I gave you my best years. I gave you my son. Your son can take his things. Kesha answered just as evenly, pointing toward the bedroom. And don't forget yours, including the wallpaper rolls. The hour has started. She took her phone from the table and demonstratively set a timer. The sound of ticking in the dead silence was deafening. The humiliation was total. Marcus, broken and crushed, silently trudged into the bedroom and began pulling his things out of the closet, throwing them into a large sports bag. He didn't look at Kesha. He was afraid to meet her gaze. Loretta, realizing that threats and accusations weren't working, tried to switch tactics to tears. She collapsed into the armchair and sobbed loudly, theatrically with wailing. Where will we go into the street at night? Do you have a heart? You have a condo in Indianapolis? Kesha ruthlessly reminded. That's a 3-hour drive. You'll make it by morning. She stood leaning against the wall and just watched. A motionless, dispassionate observer. She didn't help, didn't hinder, didn't comment. Her silence was scarier than any reproaches. They packed their things in her apartment under her icy gaze, and every second of this process was torture for them. Loretta pulled her new dragon robe, her slippers, her makeup bag out of the guest room. Marcus shoveled his numerous chargers, headphones, the gaming console he never managed to connect out of the drawers. Things turned out to be surprisingly many, as if they had lived here not 2 weeks, but 2 years. When Marcus's bag and a couple of Loretta's plaid totes were stuffed, they froze in the hallway, pathetic and confused. The hour hadn't expired yet. Pick up the rest tomorrow between 12 and 1 p.m. I'll put the boxes out by the elevator, Kesha reported. You will not enter the apartment again. Marcus finally raised his eyes to her. There were tears in them. Kesha, how can this be? We are family. Family doesn't lie. She cut off. Family doesn't live at someone else's expense. Go. She opened the front door. Like beaten dogs clutching their bags, they walked out onto the landing. Marcus turned back one last time. His lips trembled. He wanted to say something, but Kesha didn't give him the chance. She slammed the door right in front of his nose. Click. First turn of the lock. Click. Second turn. First turn. She leaned her forehead against the cold metal door and closed her eyes. She heard them saying something behind the door, then footsteps, then the sound of the elevator being called, then silence. She slowly turned around and swept her gaze over her apartment. Hers, only hers. Chaos reigned in the living room. Uneaten food, empty glasses, and overturned chair. On the sofa, the ugly wine stain still gaped. There was no feeling of victory, triumph, joy. Nothing, only hollow, ringing emptiness inside, like in an empty cathedral, and cold as steel confidence in the absolute correctness of what she had done. The adrenaline keeping her on her feet for the last few days receded, leaving behind lean fatigue. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and drank it in one gulp, then returned to the hallway, took out her phone. Hello. I need a locksmith for tomorrow, earliest morning possible. A few days passed. On Monday morning, while Kesha, wrapped in a blanket, worked on her laptop, a sharp screeching drill sound rang out in the apartment. The locksmith, a gloomy man in overalls, was changing the cylinder in the lock. This sound was painful and beautiful at the same time. It was the sound of amputation. Painful but life-saving. During the day, she gathered the remaining things of Marcus and his mother, shoes, some sweaters, chargers, and of course, the 5 rolls of wallpaper with gold filigree. She carefully packed everything into large trash bags, carried them out to the landing, and texted Marcus. Things by the elevator, leave the fob in the mailbox. No answer followed. In the evening, returning from the store, she saw the bags were gone. On Wednesday, she called the cleaners. A young guy messed with the wine stain on the sofa for a long time, treating it with some fizzing reagents. When he finished, only a barely noticeable, slightly lighter halo remained of the stain, visible only if you knew where to look. Kesha knew this ghost of a stain would stay with her forever as a scar, a reminder of the battle she won. On Saturday, exactly a week after the execution, the apartment shone with cleanliness. It was empty and quiet, too quiet. Kesha brewed herself not coffee from the new machine gifted by the boss, but simple black tea in her favorite mug. She took a blanket, went out to the balcony, and sat in the chair. The city below shone with millions of lights, just like that evening she stood here with Maya. The night air was cold and clean. She looked at the lights, at the endless movement on Lakeshore Drive. She got what she wanted. She defended her territory, her independence, her right to decide for herself. But victory didn't bring euphoria. It brought silence. She took a sip of hot tea. Inside there was no longer rage or pain, only calmness and something else new, unfamiliar. Some hardness in the very center of her being that wasn't there before. She remembered Marcus' scared eyes, his pathetic babble about family, and for the first time in all this time, she felt not a drop of pity, only cold, detached understanding. It was necessary. She got what she dreamed of. Her apartment, her silence, and her solitude, cold and flawless, like the winter sky over Chicago. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It would mean a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now and let's keep spending time together. Much love. See you soon.